I think every single other leadership book you've ever read fits into one of those or more of those components. It's a perfect overarching umbrella for all leadership type stuff. And that's why I'm such a big fan of it.
Yeah.
And we know we're expensive. We think we do really great work, but not everybody always has the budget. And that's one of the other reasons we love this book is you can go to Amazon and buy this book. And there's associated workbooks, and then there's additional materials that they've written on it. So there's a lot that's just right there, yours for the taking. Just buy the books. You get stuck, call me. But if you don't have the budget to have us come in and do a specific engagement, start with this. You won't lose.
Welcome to Lunch with Leaders, the podcast where we explore what it takes to lead, thrive, and create lasting impact. I'm Adaeze Iloeje-Udeogalanya, a TEDx speaker, leadership strategist, and the founder of African Women in STEM. Each episode features insightful conversations with innovators, trailblazers, and leaders from around the world who are transforming cultures, redefining leadership, and shaping the future of work. Together, we'll share the stories, strategies, and mindsets that will empower women in STEM to amplify their visibility, influence, and impact. So if you're ready to lead boldly, amplify your voice, and help influence what leadership looks like for women in STEM, hit follow, share this podcast, and join us every week for impactful conversations, powerful stories, and practical strategies. Right, so our guest today is Bradley Hunt. I'm going to go ahead and read his bio. Bradley and I, in my opinion, go a long way, okay? 2003 was a long way. We met at a heroic public speaking program, and it's been wonderful since then, so I'm so glad he's here. I'll read his bio so you can get to know him a little bit more. So Bradley grew up in the suburbs of Chicago, but his first job was with Motorola. Anyway, Motorola launched his career with roles in research and development, manufacturing, training, and strategic planning. And after 11 years, he planned to make Texas his home and took a position in San Antonio as the VP of Business Development for the San Antonio S-Corp conglomerate. He's also the co-founder and GM of eMavericks Consulting, and in 2024, eMavericks later merged with 3 other consulting firms to form the Y Group. He has a BS in electrical engineering from the University of Illinois. He has a master's from Purdue University. He's a PMP, project management professional, and a master human capital strategist, and also an executive coach and lean practitioner. He consults and he speaks on a broad range of topics, including operational strategies, process reengineering, corporate visioning, innovation, integrated strategic planning, but he loves organizational development. So his clients include startup entrepreneurs, Fortune 500 companies, state agencies, academia, nonprofits, and international clients. He served in multiple boards for academia, nonprofit, and technological incubators. He loves doing keynotes. He's currently writing 5 books. He lives in San Antonio and Evergreen, Colorado, kind of at the same time.
Yeah, it feels like that. Back and forth.
And he says it's largely due to a lovely lady there. There's a gifted fine artist. They have a combined 5 adult children that straddle 3 states. And he says the story of a lovely lady. He has his own very own Bradley bunch. And he's going to tell us more about that as we have our conversation. So welcome, Bradley. I'm so excited that you're here. We've been planning this for a while. So
so that's my first Brad. There's dad jokes, but what's worse than dad jokes are Brad
jokes. I love that.
So instead of the Brady Bunch, it's the Bradley Bunch.
The Bradley Bunch. It's pretty close. I can trademark that and just move on with it, okay? So right. There's a lot of money to be made. I mean, my kids love that joke. They say it all the time to annoy us, so it's fine.
Yeah, it's good. That's good.
Yeah. So let's start.
And the kids go girl, boy, girl, boy, girl.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Okay. Alternate.
Yeah. That's perfect.
And my youngest, my son, who's the youngest of my 2, and her daughter, the oldest, had the same birthday.
Oh, wow. It was meant
not
to
the
be.
Same year, not the same year.
Yeah, but it was
date.
meant to be. Yeah.
And so does our dog. Our dog we got last year.
Yeah.
But we got this puppy, picked it up. It's from a breeder that I knew. We got this fabulous, she's a wonderful dog, a golden doodle.
Yeah.
And I got the note from when they pick up the dog and to get all the paperwork.
Yeah.
And she was about 7 weeks old, I think, or something like that. Time to go. And I knew this breeder from before, from other dogs. And oh my gosh, her birthday's August 2nd also. So we have 3 birthdays the same day in the house.
So how do you guys celebrate now?
It's August, which is always a tricky time because Jessica, the summer is the busiest time for her because most people sell art in galleries, and she's in a couple galleries. But what most fine artists do is they go to these art shows and you set up a 10 by 10 or a 10 by 20-foot tent and you put your stuff there and people buy direct from you because a typical gallery commission is 50%. So a $10,000 painting in a gallery is a $5,000 if you're buying right from the artist. And it's a whole tribe of these artists, and everybody has minivans or sprinter vans outfitted with all these slots to hold everything. And it's like a family. It really are. Everyone cheers for everybody else. It's not competitive hardly at all. And anyway, it's so the summer is very busy. Beginning in June, all over Colorado, those art shows. A few in Texas, but it's just easier to just work where the art's being made and not have to haul art from Colorado to Arizona or Texas.
At least she's selling her art. People love it. And she has a community.
Correct. We won't talk more about her because Jessica could be your own guest at some point because she's got an amazing story.
Because we need to talk about her artwork. So let's talk about the work that you do, because I know you from speaking, but this is where you spend most of your time. So you work with startups, Fortune 500 and all that. This is a leadership podcast and we talk about redefining leadership. So what have you seen about leadership that kind of holds true regardless of the industry you're in or the client you're working with?
I think probably the biggest thing that you see is there's just a volume of material on leadership. It's absurd. There's so many authors and so many books. If you go to Amazon and put in leadership, and you're going to just get a deluge of tens of thousands of books that are on this topic. And yet, in my opinion, very little of it actually gets implemented. And that's the core of what we do as a consultancy, largely, is to work with leaders to actually implement, which means leaders start doing things differently than they were doing before. And that in general, it gets very muddy between things that are managerial skills and competence and what's true leadership skills. And we try to, in our day one of any kind of coaching construct with a leader, we try to remind them that your title, whatever it is, you're vice president of technology or the CI or you're a senior manager of tax. We do a lot of work with CPA firms, or we do a lot of work with universities, and you're the dean of engineering. That role and responsibilities is not really a leadership role. It's a managerial role because it was assigned to you from above. Somebody above you said, I'm putting you in charge of this. So Adaeze, here's your span, here's your budget, here's your responsibilities. But your role as a leader always comes from below and is defined by the people that are under your command, that are following you as their leader. And just because you're their boss doesn't mean you're really their leader. We make this joke, yeah, you're my leader, capital L. It's a tangle. And sometimes when we start working with leaders, we find out that personal productivity, for example, is not really a leadership topic, but we run into people in a managerial role who want to be a better leader. And they're doing email at home on the couch almost every night because they're in just an overload situation. And then I can guarantee you, if that's the situation that they're in personally, there's no way that they are spending quality time with their staff, pouring into somebody, doing any kind of succession. And you find organizations like this say, we have a succession planning initiative, and they did have a bunch of meetings, and they circle the org chart, and they go, hey, if Brad gets hit by a bus, we'll put Adaeze in. But that's not the same as grooming Adaeze for the role. And so this continuum of what's management skills and leadership skills is a little bit fuzzy. But even the word management, that's the handle on a shovel. That's that root of that word management. But leadership is very much about taking people someplace and them wanting to follow you. Because otherwise you're not really the leader. I'm doing this because my boss told me to. Or am I doing this because I want to follow this person? So just because it's a skill that you impart to somebody who was put into a managerial role, I don't know that I would call that always necessarily leadership development. My favorite benchmark on this, it was mind-blowing. So I had a project, this is a number of years ago. I was on the board of our local Chamber of Commerce at the time. And San Antonio's Military City, USA, that's one of its nicknames, because there's multiple military bases here. There's Randolph, there's the old Brooks. Some of them have been privatized, but they still have active military type functions there, but they're just open to the public with industry as well. Industry, kind of public-private partnership. But Fort Sam Houston, or now Joint Base San Antonio, has a bunch of interesting commands there that are very unique, that are I think only the Pentagon has some things that are above certain aspects of what's here. And this one command that's here is the environmental command for the U.S. military. When I say U.S. military, it's everything. I don't know how much environmental stuff there is with the Navy, but every Army base, every Air Force base they're all over the globe. So if there's a leaking fuel tank in Okinawa, at our Air Force base in Okinawa, hey, these are the guys that worry about that. And it's an interesting command because what kind of soldiers are involved in that stuff? They're soldiers, but most of them are attorneys and scientists. And if there's an endangered species at a base in Honduras, where we have a base that's been in the news a little bit with some tension between us and the Honduran government, and there's some endangered species of a bird, these are the guys that comes through San Antonio. So all this stuff flows through San Antonio on all this environmental type stuff. It's been interesting, prestigious post, and the prestige with it has to do with the impact because you're dealing with global governments all over the world. And so it's typically staffed by a one-star general. I did meet one time a full bird colonel that was that, but usually it's a one-star general. And here's the thing that was mind-blowing, Daisy. I was working with that. It was like an extension. We were trying to work out with them, help them plug into the community because how long are they going to be here for? And this post was a 2-year post. Okay. And when I say 2 years in the military, I got a lesson on that. They mean 365 times 2.
Wow.
Plus or minus the weekend. So we're talking 730 days. This is the day you take over. This is the day you're gone. And I mean, within a very narrow window. And the thing that was mind-blowing, get to the end of this long story, is that 5 months into the command of this new general taking over, they name his successor. And they have someone in the wings that we're already planning that you're going to do this job for 2 years. And then 5 months into my term, Daisy's announced as my backfill. And so that you would know what I've been working on, I could communicate to you. And you get in your mind this big chessboard at the Pentagon with all these little action figures. Here's little Daisy and here's little Brad. And they're moving people around. And it's continuous because things will happen. You may decide to retire, but then we have somebody else. And so it's very proactive. There's this huge intentionality with the things that are being done. And that, to me, is the thing that sets the best organizations apart from the others. Who doesn't want to be a better boss? Does anybody really come into work saying, I'd like to be a bad boss and frustrate my people? But there's a level of strategic thought and implementation there that really sets the best organizations apart. And that's very different succession planning, isn't it? Because it implies that I already know who Adaeze is, what she wants to do, what she aspires to do, what she's willing to do for the sake of the organization. I have that agenda and I'm looking at the different holes. And it's very organic and it's certainly not static. Because something happened. I might have a terrible injury or something like that, or an illness, or who knows, and we have to adjust. So that classic quote from that German general gets translated into English, no plan survives contact with the enemy. But that's so different than just looking at the org chart and going, if something happens to Adaeze, we'll put this person in. No, we have 4 people that we're trying to groom, and depending on how they're doing and how they feel about it, we might adjust plans, but it's a very active thing. And you could see it once in a while. I think a good example of this was Steve Jobs knew he had pancreatic cancer for a long time. It was the slow kind, fortunately for him and his family. And as it got later in his life, as he became less and less functional, we found out that he had Tim Cook under his arm for years, grooming him to take the reins over. And the flow at Apple just seems to have been not that big of a deal, not that big of a deal. But you can look at other places where there wasn't a fabulous leader who was very effective, a big turnaround. I think a good benchmark for that, you can go back in time to Jack Welch, and he had a bad rep for being Neutron Jack, but all about we're going to be number 1 or number 2, or we're going to get out of this market. And GE became very successful again, and GE Finance took off and made a huge amount of money. And then, I don't know, maybe it's not fair. I'm sure there should be some GE people that would say, wait, Brad, that's not accurate. But they aren't the darling that they were. Their CEO isn't guest speaking all over the country right now on leadership topics the way Jack Welch was. And so it maybe didn't quite survive Jack Welch. And you find those people that have this ability to not just be effective managers, because there's an awful lot of good companies out there that our retirement funds are invested in and they're doing just fine. And I get my little advice from my guy, and he said, make sure you're buying some Hershey, because Hershey's just one of those blue chips that'll go on forever and it'll survive recessions. And yeah, it may have some it's one of those things that buy it and keep it forever stocks. But other things are up and down, they're real volatile. I don't know what's happening at Hershey right now. You could probably bet on them, they're going to be fine. But that's not the same as the darling companies where just amazing things are happening because of the amazing leadership involved. Jim Collins writes about that mystique, that kind of almost paradoxical, that 5th level leader. If you've ever seen that pyramid in Good to Great, at the top, he calls it the 5th level leader because they're inspirational but humble. They have incredible talent, but incredible humility, and people want to follow them. People quit their company, want to work for that person. That's different than having just a good boss. And
Yeah.
so, anyhow, I think that principle of those type of things, how Jim Collins writes about it, that's true in every industry. It doesn't matter whether we're talking about higher ed or Francis, the CEO that took over the Girl Scouts and got them back on the right track. These amazing people that are incredible talent. That's true in every industry, that they have this level of humility. And I like the same idea. You see this thread, it's everywhere.
Yeah.
If you start looking for it, it's kind of like that principle. I can never remember the name of that psychological principle or phenomenon that occurs that when you buy a new car, all of a sudden you see them everywhere.
The car syndrome. Yeah, they call it
Yeah.
that.
And
Yeah.
whatever that is. And you start seeing this in leadership because the first book, Pat Lencioni, my firm, we use a lot of his stuff. We
Yeah.
love his stuff.
Yeah.
I called him up one time. I didn't get him. I got his admin because I was looking to book him for a possible conference, just for grins. I wonder what it costs to get Pat to show up. And I love his podcast. And like I said, we've been using different parts of his materials for years with our clientele. And when I said the starting price is $150K, I don't think that's going to be in the budget. But he's not famous for his very first book at all, because it's probably the least read of his book. It was his first book, so maybe it wasn't as good as his latter books. But this first book he ever wrote was called The 5 Temptations of a CEO. And it's a perfectly solid, good book. It's about a CEO, new CEO on a train ride, and he's getting life lessons from the past CEOs, almost like an Ebenezer Scrooge Christmas Carol with the ghosts of the prior CEO. But it's largely a treatise on humility and not letting this job go to your head and all those things. And I think one of the reasons that book didn't get the traction that Lencioni's other books, like 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, everyone's heard of that book and everyone's read. That's a fantastic book. But the 5 Temptations of a CEO, I think the reason it doesn't get so much traction is the only people that would buy that book are the people that don't have the disease in the first place. So if you already have some humility and say, oh my gosh, 5 Temptations of a CEO, I wonder what pitfall could I fall into? You probably don't need the book because you're already, the fact that you're looking for help, you're looking for help. So anyhow, I love this idea that you can look at models for most effective leaders and then those well-studied, data-driven things, whether you're using Jim Collins, good to great. I'll give you my plug for my favorite book on this topic in a second.
Oh, yeah.
But you see these same patterns over and over again. And it doesn't matter the industry. It doesn't matter the organization's size. It doesn't even matter the level. They can manifest at the supervisor level or at the C office. But my favorite book on that, and my book I always say people on every podcast I've done, I think I've thrown it in there, and with no commission, I'm not being incentivized for this, is The Leadership Challenge by Barry Kouzes and Jim Posner. They're both Southern Cal area. I think it might be even near San Diego State or something like that, but it's Southern California area.
Yes.
They're both academicians. And in general, most of the stuff that comes out of academia, if you've read some of those books, it's like all sorts of white paperish. You could explain this in just 2 paragraphs, but it took you 20 pages. It's very scholarly. Often it'll be very descriptive, but not prescriptive. It's lots of work smarter, not harder. And you have to have an effective strategy map. Could you help me how to build an effective strategy map? Oh, that's different. So it's very theoretical. This book centers around 5 key pillars of leadership and then 2 principles for each of them. And they've studied this for over 40 years. It's one of those books that I think should be at everybody's shelf. And if you're only going to have one leadership book, I think that's the one. And I don't think you should only have one leadership book, but the 6.
I mean, you've listed a lot already, and I think we're going to add that to the show notes.
Put it on a deserted island and they say you can only have 2 books, one on leadership and one something else. So you should probably take a Bible, Encyclopedia Britannica, and the leadership book. That's the book to take, The Leadership Challenge, because the first principle is modeling the way. It's all about walking the talk. And you can't do that unless you've codified what your talk is, which is all about culture codification. I think we're going to talk about that in a little bit. You have to take people on a journey towards something. So that's all about inspiring people toward a shared vision. What does success look like? Where are we going? Where is this going? You have to do the right things so that people can do the right things for you. That's called enabling others to act. It's that principle that generals typically aren't shooting bullets at the enemy, but they make sure the troops have guns and they know they have a plan and they have food and there's gas for the tanks and there's a place to sleep and there's a place to have R&R, tennis courts and golf courses to refresh and on. Continuous improvement, their principle that challenge the process, that you're constantly looking at ways to make things better. You can't go into Costco and buy the TV that you bought a year ago right now, but you can buy something that's even bigger with higher resolution and all sorts of other bells and whistles, and it even costs less money. That's
true.
continuous improvement. That's going down a learning curve. That's the principle, challenge, the process. And finally, the fifth one is all about encouraging the heart, and that's about esprit de corps and morale and reward and recognition. But those things, walking the talk, modeling the way, inspiring a shared vision, enabling others to act, challenging the process, and encouraging the heart. I think every single other leadership book you've ever read fits into one of those or more of those components. It's a perfect overarching umbrella for all leadership type stuff. And that's why I'm such a big fan of it.
Yeah.
And we know we're expensive. We think we do really great work, but not everybody always has the budget. And that's one of the other reasons we love this book is you can go to Amazon and buy this book. And there's associated workbooks, and then there's additional materials that they've written on it. So there's a lot that's just right there, yours for the taking. To buy the books. You get stuck, call me. But if you don't have the budget to have us come in and do a specific engagement, start with this. You won't lose. And one of the coolest things I think there's back to that idea of humility is if you are working on a master's or doctoral thesis, I don't know that it even costs. It may have some nominal cost, but they will share their 40 years of research across some 100 different countries, studying tens of thousands of leaders. They'll share their database with you. And they have spawned an additional well over 500 dissertations from their database that where other people have leveraged their research.
Yeah.
They're just class acts. They're class acts. So anyhow, that's, I guess, go ahead.
I'm just like, this is amazing because you touched on so many points. I'm just thinking of my 20-year industry, and I've worked at different organizations, and I can tell what's strong, especially when you talk about succession planning. And sometimes I wonder if it has anything to do with just either fear on some level or just the desire to hold on to something, because it almost feels if I'm training someone, I step, for example, you talked about the 2-year position that they stepped in 5 months in, they already have a successor. I don't know if it's this thing that they feel like if I do, that means I'm putting myself out of a job or something. I don't know why it is, but it's not normal.
Yeah.
It's not normal to groom. Once in a while, there might be one person that gets groomed all the way, but in most organizations, it's usually not more than one.
No.
And continuity, again, you talked about that. Because of those things, people just leave positions that somebody else is put in there, and they're starting from the beginning. They have a it doesn't
You get
exactly
sucked into a vacuum. And you look at, I use this all the time as a framework just to suggest have people just be thinking differently, is there are a few professions where this kind of doesn't happen, where people are groomed specifically for a specific role. And it's very hands-on and it's very methodical, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the vast majority of people, no, it's, there's a new opening. Daisy, you've done such a good job here with this. We're going to promote you to assistant director of this because of what you did in the past. And hopefully you'll figure it out. We're going to throw you into the deep end, and hopefully you're a strong swimmer and you'll figure it out. And you go through that development cycle. I'm a big fan of that model that comes out of the Ken Blanchard Company, situational leadership. And we look at how your commitment wavers as you're trying to figure this thing out. And we have phrases like the honeymoon is over and the bloom is off the rose. Because why? Because it started excited and then it's harder than you thought. Why? Because oftentimes because you were not equipped to do it. You self-teach. It's like having a bad professor at one of those classes that they're not going to tell you what's on the exam. And you go to some lecture and you get talked at, and then they give you a bunch of books to read. And then come the exam time, you hope you're ready. And that is more or less how a lot of us wind up in roles, is we throw you into the deep end and you figured it out. But 3 professions that don't work that way for a very good reason: electricians, pilots, surgeons. Because if you make a mistake as an electrician, you're probably going to kill yourself potentially. If you make a mistake as a surgeon, you're going to kill the patient. If you mistake as a pilot, you're going to kill yourself and everybody else is in the plane. And so you think about how pilots, and I have pictures of this in some of our content. Here's a room where they're teaching future anesthesiologists how to do an epidural, because we're going to poke this in somebody's spine. We go too far, it's a problem. We don't go in far enough and all that stuff. And of course, they have typically, I don't know, fetal pigs or some other animal cadaver they can play with. They have Resuscita Annie dolls. It's epidural dolls. And maybe, I don't know what her name is, Elizabeth the epidural doll or whatever. And so they're practicing on that. But in the same room, they're doing this at stations. And then over at this station, that's just a classroom. But in this station, they are completely gowned up as if they were in a sterile field, like they're in the OR, and they're doing it on this, whatever this thing is, as if it was OR. So they're in the robes and everything else, even though it's a classroom. You can see the desk thing outside, because we want to simulate this as much as close as possible to the real thing, because you have to learn how to do this right very carefully, or the consonants are high. What do you do the first day you're becoming a pilot? You sit in the other seat while somebody over here is doing the work,
Yes.
and they take off, and then they give you some stuff. You did some work on the ground first, all sorts of lectures. Are you ready, Daisy? You're going to take control for just a little bit. You do a couple little things. We're going to go, good job. And after many hours of that, eventually one day we will let you solo.
Mm.
And congratulations, you now can fly a single engine propeller plane in the daylight, in good weather by yourself. But probably can't fly at night, and you can't fly if it's raining, and it's not only one engine. And then we start talking about two engines and jets, and you think about how we do that. That's a best practice for training a surgeon or an electrician or this whole apprenticing thing, and very intentional hands-on. But that's not how most of us were trained for the jobs we do now.
No, not at all. And we waste
It's
a lot
it's
of money.
osmosis.
We
It's
waste a lot of
on-the-job
money.
training.
And we waste a lot of money that way because, again, think about it. When everybody is starting afresh, every single time, you throw them at the deep end, they kind of drown and kind of float and start things over. And they might do things differently. They don't know what worked before, what didn't work. They don't know what to do better. And to your point, they can go and read some leadership books that just have fragments of what they need to know that may or may not apply to their situation. And I think I like what you said about the whole management versus leadership thing, because that's something that I was like, this is so awesome. I don't think I've ever heard that said before, but also not understanding that is also making this whole situation very complex. So I'm just thinking, if you look back at your career and you've worked with a lot of organizations, how do you see, like, when you come in with your framework and process and all that, how do you see that change when they make that change from what they used to do to where they're actually supposed to be? What is the impact to the organization, for example?
Just because you have great leadership doesn't mean you're always going to be successful. You might be the best CEO that the buggy whip industry ever had, but unless the Amish have a population explosion, all of a sudden the buggy whip business has gone down a lot over the last 100 years, right? And you see those kind of disruptive type of industries, so you could still lose on the business front. But in general, I think you can look and see let's go back to Jim Collins. I think my favorite books of Jim Collins are actually not Good to Great. People talk about Good to Great all the time. That was written, I think, in the mid 90s, if I remember right. And it's an awesome book. Jim Collins is an amazing guy, and his research is so solid, and he is so accomplished as an author and as a speaker. I've heard him speak live a couple times, and it's just brilliant. And you know what's interesting about him? It's back to his pedigree being just earned by his incredible acumen. He is just Jim Collins. So this guy that was a full professor running an institute, whatever it was at Stanford, has no PhD. It's not Dr. Jim Collins. It's Jim Collins. That doesn't happen in higher ed, especially at the West Coast Ivy League at Stanford. Goodness sakes. But nope, he's that brilliant that we're going to put him in charge of this stuff, even though he doesn't even have a PhD. But his first book, which doesn't get enough airplay, I think, he wrote this 10 years before Good to Great, is called Built to Last. And it is all about the power of culture. Good to Great builds on that foundation. But when you read Good to Great, you're reading out of order if you haven't read Built to Last. And Built to Last is all about these companies that survive so long, so well, and adapt and pivot. Is all about the culture, which is all about being missionally driven and having really solid core values. When those two things are done well, it makes everything else easier. And examples of that, I don't know what your audience thinks about Southwest Airlines right now. Southwest Airlines is a famous Texas-y story because Herb Kelleher, who founded it, was working in San Antonio as an attorney, and was back before the federal law and state laws were weird about where air carriers could go. And he was frustrated. And his whole business model was, our competition is not Braniff or TWA or obviously United American, the ones that are still around. Our competition is Chevrolet and Greyhound. We're trying to make it worth your time to take our plane instead of your car or the bus from San Antonio to Dallas to Houston back to San Antonio. That was the triangle. That's all it was. And they called it Southwest Airlines because it was patterned after Pacific Southwest Airlines. That was the original silly airline, Pacific Southwest Airlines. Old pictures, you can Google this and pull it up. And there's pilots at Pacific Southwest Airlines with clown noses on. And they painted silly faces on the airplanes. And all of that kind of silliness that we know and love about Southwest, we don't realize that wasn't Herb's invention. He copied that from them. Even the name. He just black out Pacific and call it Southwest Airlines. Because why didn't he call it Texas Airlines? He called it Southwest after copying Pacific Southwest. So anyhow, But they had their three key core value principles of fun loving attitude, servant's heart, and what's the other one? Can't remember. And I feel like they've lost their way. That was their culture. Don't take yourself seriously and all those things. And now they kind of look like this. I'm gonna fly them tomorrow back to Colorado. I flew in last night from Colorado. I'll fly back to Colorado tomorrow night. I'll be in Arizona next week, and I don't hardly fly Southwest anymore because there's no
Yeah.
reason to. There's no reason. Their fares aren't any different anymore, and
Yes.
their loyalty system doesn't work as well for me because I
Mhm.
like to use my points when I accumulate them for big international trips. Now,
Mhm.
you can take Southwest to Aruba. You can take Southwest to Belize, I think, a few places, Cancun, but you can't go to Australia. And they're just another airline now.
Yeah.
They lost that secret sauce that was in their culture. So, Built to Last by Jim Collins. Then he writes Good to Great. And then, probably my favorite book of his is the book after that is called Great by Choice.
Yes.
And Great by Choice gets into the mechanics of these things. And it takes great lessons from these organizations that are not 10% better than their competitors, but 10x. He calls them where the profitability of this organization compared to their competitors. Their competitors are profitable. We all own stocks in some of those companies,
Mhm.
but this company within that industry is 10 times more successful than their competitor. And he's peeling the onion all the way back to Good to Great and all the way back to Built to Last. It starts with getting that culture really codified. Then you have the Good to Great principles. And then you have the Great by Choice disciplines. That stuff just works everywhere. And so you asked the question you asked started with was what kind of differences do you see? See, here's Jim Collins' database. These companies are 10 times more successful. If you're 50% more successful than your competitor, you feel, if you're twice as successful, wee ha. But 10x, we're talking an order of magnitude more successful, more profitable, more all of those things. And I think that's the gold standard. If that's what you
Yes.
can get. Do you
Yes.
always get that? No. But I pretty much guarantee you that the organizations that are that successful in the long term, you can go in there and study and you'll see a lot of things we're talking about having been implemented, that it's real. They're serious about people first and their culture. They're serious. One of the pieces I stole from Southwest years ago is customers are second. Customers are second. Customers are not number one. What's number one? Us, the employees. If we take care of each other, it will flow out to the customers
Yes.
naturally. But if we aren't caring for each other well, then it makes it really difficult. And it makes sense. If you're a flight attendant supposed to give amazing service and you just got chewed out by your boss,
It's
well,
gonna be hard.
it's going to show up on the job. It's going to show up on the job. Whereas if you're feel like you go to family and they love and care for you and you love and care for them, then this job is a blast. This is fun because I get to
Yes.
do. And then when there's a high maintenance person, I watched a guy that was in front of me give a flight attendant a hard time yesterday about his seat wasn't working good. And I'm thinking, I don't think she's a mechanic.
It
I
can
don't
become
think
a
she's doing
fear.
anything. We're up in the air right now. And she was very professional. Okay. And this I should say, because she did a good job. This was on a United flight and she was just very professional. But that would have been so much harder if she was having a bad day because her boss treated her poorly. And this is just this people first concept still is just, it irks me when we call this kind of stuff soft skills.
Yes.
I'm not sure who came up with that term. It's my most favorite one. And you know this because we worked on stuff like this together when
Yeah,
we were in
I
our
know.
program. My least favorite term of all time is work-life balance.
Yeah.
That is just so wrong in my book because work is not the enemy of life. We shouldn't have those things juxtaposed as this. They're somehow enemies. That on one side of this is my life, and on this side is my work. No, it's all about life because work is where we spend the most of our time. We spend more time at work than we do with our kids.
Yes.
Doesn't mean we love our colleagues or our boss more than our children, but work is a huge part of life. It's how we change the planet directly, maybe indirectly, because you have an amazing kid who grows up to cure some disease and you're the parent of that kid. That's awesome. But either way, that person that does cure the disease, their work really mattered, what they did in the workplace. But the second one that I hate the most is why do we call this stuff soft skills? I think the only justification I can have for that is it's hard to measure. Maybe we should call them hard skills because they're hard to measure.
You have to measure.
But we do have the data is overwhelming that when you get these people things right, it shows up everywhere. It shows up in the bottom line because you have less turnover, you have higher engagement, all of those things. Harvard publishes some awesome stuff on this. One of my favorite gurus there is Dr. Ashish Nanda, And I saw him do this chalk talk, and I'll be using it tomorrow with a client project here with the city of San Antonio, of how the most important thing that you can positively actually do, and this is a component of the Harvard MBA. My MBA is from Purdue. At the time was top 10 in executive MBAs, but Harvard's the gold standard. It costs a lot of money,
Yes.
but it's the gold standard. And this is a mandatory class that they have. And the number one thing that a leader has to do is create a positive work environment. It's not about your investment banking and EBITDA and all those things, because with a positive work environment, you get engaged people. And engaged people are your best shot of having whoever your customers are experience something that exceeds their expectations. And then when that happens, it's just a domino of human behavior. Because when our expectations are exceeded, we become fierce advocates for that. And the organization wins. And my favorite case study of that is Costco.
Yeah,
You know,
I don't know why
yeah,
musicians don't realize that, but when you said this about soft skills, because I guess on my podcast that we're talking about, it was like they call it soft skills to almost minimize it. But the reality is that, especially when you're trying to get into higher
yeah,
roles in the organization, they judge you by those same soft skills. Even though they
yeah.
can measure it, it doesn't matter how great you are technically, they're judging you by your soft skills. So I wonder, because there's something I heard where someone was saying that the leadership that's being practiced in the workplace and in organizations right now is a command and control thing, probably from the army. So maybe the whole idea of appearing tough, is that why someone coined it soft skills and try to minimize it?
I don't know. Yeah, because it's fuzzy. It's about being more compassionate. I haven't looked for it really
Yeah.
hard to put that into ChatGPT or Claude and say, hey, Claude,
Where did this
term
come
soft
from?
skills come
Yeah.
from. But I agree that it's harder. It's a little bit harder to measure, but it's not really that. Excuse me. It's not hard to measure. It's hard to link, because we understand this in advertising all the time, that I'm going to go spend this money to put this thing out there. And I think we could probably use case studies from Procter and Gamble. They're considered oftentimes the best marketing firm in the world, because they can say, we changed the color of the toothpaste and we got a 0.1% increase in market share. And they did the math on that it's statistically significant. They did the P test, the T test, with the 95% confidence interval, the true statisticians to say, no, that is a significant thing. We made a difference. But we don't know the causality.
Yeah.
We don't understand why people like this scent a little bit better. Most of us are old enough to remember New Coke and what a debacle that was. And they did hard market research and they still got it wrong. That linkage there, we understand that. And people spend a lot of money in advertising and hope that it gives them the right return. But the linkage is a little tricky. We have the same principle here. We can invest in our leadership and invest in our people, and it should show up in more innovation. We can measure that. We can measure the number of new ideas. There's always a way to measure stuff. It feels like it's a Jim Collins commercial today, but back to Jim Collins, I heard him speak one time about metrics and measuring outcomes. And he's got this fantastic story about the new conductor of the Cleveland Orchestra, which Cleveland Orchestra is a big deal. And so they had a lot of money. And so the Cleveland Orchestra there's no orchestra in California or Texas that's the caliber of the Cleveland Orchestra. And so this guy's going to take this job, and he pretty much, and I may get the anecdote a little bit off here, but you'll see the principle here in a second. And he refuses to take the job till he can agree with the board on how he will be measured. What will success look like? And so you're one of the most successful orchestras in the world. People have to die for the season tickets to become available. People fly in from other parts of the world to hear this orchestra. They're that good. If you're really into classical music and have the money, then you're going to go to Philadelphia and Berlin and London and Cleveland. But no, Cleveland Orchestra is the real deal. This is tier one internationally. So you're always sold out. You get a standing ovation. You're unbelievable. That's all that stuff. How do you measure success when you're already? So you know what? We can measure how long the standing ovation was, the duration of the standing ovation. We can measure how many composers approach us to want us to debut their new pieces. How many festival invites do we get, where people hoping for us to come internationally to their festival? On and on. It's soft to measure all those things, because do we know this guy's doing a really good job? But if those metrics all change to the positive, even longer standing ovations and even more festival invites and even more debut pieces, you got to have enough. That's pretty much preponderance of evidence to say something good's happening. And I think you can do that same thing. We can look at engagement numbers. By the way, let's talk about that for just a second, because
Yes.
I think organizations, most decent organizations, are probably spending at some level some form of surveying their employees to see how happy are the campers.
Say something
Sometimes,
quickly there.
sure,
I took a lot of those surveys, and I have people that have taken those surveys, and even now I'm still in the industry. But those surveys are worded in a way that you kind of know the answer you're supposed to give. So the thing I
yeah,
hear, I used to say is, do you want me to be honest, or do you want me to just give you an answer? And most times people will be like, the answer I want to give is not here.
yeah.
So I'm just gonna say that because sometimes it's not really, yeah.
There's bad surveys. I would agree.
Mhm.
Terrible questions, or it. So this is a true story. Last few years of friends and clients that are here, that I've done quite a bit of work for that organization over the years, off and on. We tend to come in on a project and then leave and then come back in on another project, kind of thing, versus like my CPA every year he's going to work on my
Yeah.
stuff, ties kind of thing. But this guy retired, and they did a national search and brought this new CEO in, and he came from out of state, big pedigree from a even much bigger organization than the one he was taking over here, same industry, but he was the number two at a very big organization in Chicago and became the number one at a small organization in San Antonio. And smart guy. But I watched the whole culture pivot because he managed to his board very well, but he did not manage to the organization well at all. And he created a culture of fear. And we fortunately felt that feel good about this, dodged the bullet. We do a lot of 360 surveys, facilitate that. I have four that I use from time to time, four different ones, and fifth, sixth, and seventh, by the way. Oh, there is a 360 called the Leadership Practice Inventory that is the Leadership Challenge book applied. But anyhow, wasn't using this tool. And we wound up not doing the project because we just didn't have the bandwidth. And I was so relieved because the COO came to me and said, "Hey, we all got together and decided how we were going to answer his 360 survey because we feel like that if we were honest, it would just make things so much worse. The board, he's got the board full. I don't know what we're going to do. Maybe I should all start working on a resume because it was so unsafe. No one would be honest on the 360." So anyhow, but the satisfaction survey issue can be, yeah, poorly rated questions.
Yeah.
And my pet peeve with them oftentimes is they're not really getting at engagement. And I like this guy, big sure I get his name. I think it's Bob Kelleher. Nothing as I know to do
No, I
with
think
nothing Herb Kelleher and Southwest Airlines. And his definition, I shamelessly stole this from him. His definition of an engaged employee is when an employee will give discretionary effort without being asked. Because we ask Adaeze, how do you feel about here? Do you feel like you're compensated fair? Yeah. Do you feel like your boss respects you? Yeah. Do you generally like your colleagues? Yeah. Do you kind of what you do? Yeah. Are you highly engaged? If I have to ask you to work the weekend because of this huge project that's hitting us all right now, then maybe you're really not that engaged. But when I show up to work early because I got so much to do, like a week like this, it's a bonkers week. I got so many deadlines, deliverables that are on light right here. And I get to the office at 6:30 and you're already here unasked. Oh yeah, I had to come in. I got so much I got to do. That's a highly engaged person when they will sacrifice to do the extra effort, go the extra mile without being told to do, without being asked to. And to get at that, you have to ask some deeper questions about how do you really feel? What's your motivation? What's your passion? So those 12 questions that Gallup asks are
Yeah.
good. I love their research on do you have a best friend at work? They get dissed on that question a lot by other experts, I think. But boy, Gallup has so much data. I think
It makes sense. It makes sense. Because if you can't have a friend at work, that means it's a very unsafe and uncomfortable work environment. That means
something's
you don't
wrong.
trust
Yeah.
anybody. That means you don't trust
Yes.
even one
That's what they
person.
say. I love how
Yeah.
Gallup explains it. Say, hey, we're not saying that you need to run around and make sure everybody has a friend.
No.
Who's your friend? On your performance review this year, we need a plan for you to make a friend. No, their point is in a healthy organization where people are engaged with the work, close friendship bonds will form.
Yes, exactly.
So if you don't have close friendship bonds, something's in the way, something's wrong. So it's not that you have to have an agenda to create friendship. It's that no, if you measure it and you don't have lots of friendships in the workplace, something's in the way. And that's the job of leadership, to figure out what that is and get it out of the way. Because they have to, there's the 11 other questions that they ask about it. They publish those questions. I'm sure you can't leverage their database. You can't compare yourself to other companies in their database unless you become a Gallup client. And that's probably not real cheap because their database is the best in the world. But the Gallup 12 questions, or Google that, it'll pop up in an instant. And you could ask similar questions to your organization and get some data. And it's only 12 questions.
And they have good reports too that you can always reference and access. The reports are so data rich. So even if they don't give you the database, if you take all of that together and combine it, you will get a basis to work off of.
Yeah, their annual report just came out about a month ago, and you probably saw it. That engagement is at an all-time low. We're back to what it was like during COVID.
It's the last several years, and that's just horrible. Time flew. I could listen to you all day, Brad. I'm going to take notes on all the books. So you recommended a lot of incredible books to read. And I like how you broke it down so people will know where to start and what to do first. And especially the ones that are not so famous and people don't know about. But I'd like to ask this question because you've done so much work. Just listening to you, I can see that you absolutely love what you do. I can tell that you've made a lot of difference in a lot of organizations. So you described your mission as being water to those that you serve. What does that look like, and what's the impact that you hope to have, or you hope that creates in organizations and people over time?
I came to the planet to do this kind of work. I feel this is my life's work. It's been my life's work for over 20 years now. We were formed as a consultancy in 2003, but I had a different one. But I did some work together, and then I started really working with these guys in 2004. And I'm the last man standing because my one partner is still active as one client he's still seeing. But he's 86 years old. And he just slowed down, but he's still not really technically retired because it's our life's work. And that water thing came to me via another book that I really enjoy. I use with clients all the time. It's called The Path, P-A-T-H, specifically by Lori Beth Jones. Because if you put The Path into Amazon, you're going to find that there's 27 books called The Path. It's an old book, and it's got a personal story. We are faith-based in general. The team is doing this because they feel like it's also almost ministry, like a calling. And her personal story of faith transformation is kind of in there. So if you don't want to, still read the book, because the first part of the book, I just love her exercises that make you think about what you came to the planet to do. It's all about finding your personal mission. That's called The Path. And it was recommended to me. And I felt like I already was on my own path, but I went through the exercise of, wow, this is good stuff. So I use that, facilitate that with clients, one-on-one coaching all the time. Say, hey, if you don't like her story at the back or like kind of personal testimony, that's fine. But the exercises she has you do. And so one of the ones is about, are you more earth, or are you more wind, or are you more fire, or more water? And I'm like, I feel like I'm really water, because I feel like what we add to our clients is sustaining stuff that they need, just like the plant needs water. The water isn't the plant. The plant's doing the heavy lifting. Somehow you put this little seed in the ground and you come back a few years later and it's this big tree that's got apples on it. That's the miracle of nature. But man, the water is the help and it's life-giving. And so we like to think that we are having deep impact on people's lives, because better bosses go home and they're better mothers and fathers, and they're better partners to each other. And when you're not in overload and you feel like you're doing your calling, you have to juggle all these different things because it's all part of life. But you love your work and you love your colleagues and you love your third grader too. And so you do have energy for helping them with their times tables on a Tuesday night, not in email, because you've got your life in order on what really matters, because we're never going to catch up. I encourage people all the time when the holidays come is to not take the whole break. Take a day, maybe or two, to go into the office when nobody else is there, and don't try to do any normal work. Don't try to catch up. You're never going to catch up. Come on. Your inbox is going to be full the next thing. And when I say normal work, I love David Allen. We use his stuff all the time, Getting Things Done, guru. I love that guy's stuff. And he talks about 3 classes of work. The work that you came up with, all the stuff that's on your plate that came from your thinking. And I'm talking about the do-it-yourself projects you want to do at the kitchen, to I got to get this meeting organized, or I have this initiative I'm trying to do, and my boss, I'm not even talking about that stuff that I came up with. That's class 1. Class 2 is all the stuff that the rest of the universe put on my plate. My kid wants to know how he can earn more money to get virtual reality goggles. My partner wants to refinish the living room. We're going to pull up the carpet, put down hardwood floors. It's 30-year-old carpet. I think it's time. And your boss says, where's that report? And the board wants this from you. And so there's class one's the stuff you came up with. Class two is the stuff that the rest of the universe came up with. What's class three? Because that covers everything. Class three is the work it takes to keep track of one and two. It's making the shopping list so you don't waste time at the grocery store. It's the enabling, it's the system. And we find leaders all the time that have great hearts for their people, but they're out of control on that, which makes everything so much harder. And thus that idea that I'm going to have good, deep one-on-one conversations with my team, at least monthly with everybody. And then we talk, well, when's the last time you went to lunch? We don't go to lunch. I eat at my desk when I'm hungry, but that's about it. And so why don't you strategically go to lunch with that person and have a 2-hour conversation with some food involved about how they're doing? Because we tend to understand, we're good at talking about the work. Let's call that good management. We're talking about what's the status of this? What's the status of this? This project's late. This project's under budget. This project's more likely over budget and late. And what are we going to do about it? We manage the work together well. And then we let our guard down at 5:30. We're going to maybe go to happy hour because we like each other. And this is just normal, healthy organization. And we're going to talk about the Spurs right now because Spurs took out the Trailblazers and have a cold one. And we talk about our family and the soccer tournament. And my trip, I'm going to the South Pacific, a bucket list trip. Some friends gifted us a cruise. So we're going to go from Fiji to Tahiti, 12 days. So this is going to be cool. But we're either talking about the work or our personal lives. We're not talking about how are you doing? What does success look like? How am I grooming you for the next role? Do you even want the next role? I think there's two great metrics that leaders can aspire to. I think a great mark that you can set for yourself, and I set this for myself back when I had a normal job, is that you will never, ever get another 2-week notice slip. Now, that doesn't mean you aren't going to have turnover. But you might get a 6-month notice slip. You might get a 9-month notice slip where a female on your staff comes to you and says, I'm having a baby and we're so excited, but this is number 2. And my partner and I have made this strategic decision that it's not worth the extra money. We want someone to stay at home and be the full-time parent. I don't care if that's 2 guys, 2 gals, or a heterosexual couple, whatever, but we're going to make that choice. It might be a Mr. Mom. My right-hand guy that I do the most amount of work with on my team together is the secondary breadwinner at that house. So he's been the Mr. Mom. The second one just graduated from college, so it's getting easier. But I remember they had 4 kids, and he had 4 kids at 4 campuses. He had one in high school that didn't drive, one in middle school, one in grade school, and one in daycare. He was just, all he did was drive, and his wife was traveling internationally. But you might get the 9-month notice slip saying, hey, I'm going to have a baby. And of course, I'm going on maternity. And of course, I'll be back. No, I'm not coming back. I can't tell HR because it would screw up my benefits. But I'm telling you because our relationship is so tight that you need to start working on my backfill now because I'm not coming back. Or I've had this dream. I've always wanted to have a food truck and sell cupcakes. And you're giving me 6 months notice. That's your dream, not 2 weeks, I'm out of here. And if you built that kind of relationship with your team, then you're safe to tell it that, hey, this is not floating my boat. I like you, Brad. I even like the company. But man, I really have a passion to work with animals. I'm going to go get a job working in animal care for a city someplace, which is, those people deserve combat pay. That is one of the toughest jobs in the world. But that's your passion. And so it's not that you want to have turnover. You just don't ever get any sudden 2-week notice turnover slips. Going to a competitor. Why are you going to a competitor? We ask this question, why are you leaving? And blah, 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 and then they're going to give me more money. And then we match the money and they still accepted. Yeah, because we don't ask the right question. Gallup's got some good data on this, but we shouldn't ask the question, why are you leaving? We should ask the question, why did you start looking? That leaving is one question too late. So that would be one thing. You would never, ever get another 2-week notice slip. That would be a great mark for a leader.
Yeah, thank you, Bradley, so much. And I'm going to ask this because you have given us so much, and I know everybody listening to this will want to be like, where can I find Brad? So where can people find you if they want to learn more or collaborate with you?
Easiest email to remember, so after you remember my name, is we have a generic email box for our firm. Our firm is called Y Group, and that is our email domain, ygroup.com, just like WHY.
Yeah.
No, it's not an homage to Simon Sinek, and let's start with Y, but I love his stuff. We predate
Yeah.
him.
Yeah, you pick
Predate
him.
his book. We think Y is always a wonderful, what is this really about? Which gets to purpose and mission again. info@ygroup.com is my email. I'm on LinkedIn, Bradley K. Hunt. You can Google us. We'll pop up in San Antonio, but we work across the country I've been as far south on a project as Fort Lauderdale. I've been as far out west as Seattle and Portland, mostly Texas-based stuff, but we're doing an awful lot of work in Arizona and Colorado as well. It's a wonderful life. It's a little hectic at times. I never set out to be an entrepreneur, to be self-employed. I originally probably thought I'd retire at Motorola after 30, 40 years. And I fell in love with Texas and could not see going back to where Motorola needed me to go next. And I felt like I might not know my kids as well. And so I kind of got off the corporate fast track to work in a more family-oriented S-corp conglomerate here in San Antonio. They have everything, sporting goods, wine and liquor distribution, vitamins, a bunch of different businesses holdings, and kind of became a little bigger fish in a small pond. And then economics and some sad stuff, a plane crash and other things led me to what I've been doing the last 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
But it's wonderful the work I get to do. And that's where that goes back to that water. When you're thirsty, where the plant needs it, it can be life-giving. And we think we get to make some pretty cool impact on the lives of others.
I love that. And you can use water for so many other things. So it's just versatile and good that way. So thank you so much. And everyone listening, make sure you follow Bradley and me. He's on LinkedIn as Bradley K. Hunt. So follow him. DM us. Tell us, what have you learned? What was most helpful?
Please give some feedback.
Some feedback, because we really need to know. I want to be able to give you more of what you want. And one of the ways to support this podcast is to leave us a review. So follow the podcast and leave us a review, and I will shout you out in future solo episodes. So thank you so much, Bradley. I appreciate
Great
this
to come
so
back. We started with a very broad brush. Maybe down the road, we'll come back and maybe do a
some deep
specific,
dive.
let's just talk about culture, or let's just talk about succession planning, or let's just talk about frameworks for individual development, or a strategic planning framework. There's so much out there to avail yourself as a leader. There's great resources. It's the implementation. That's what separates.
That's what,
It's, do you do something with it? You actually change what you've been doing, change your own behavior to get different outcomes.
Yes, we will do that. You've given me ideas, and you will be like, why did I say that? Because I'm going to come after you, Bradley. You know that. But thank you for offering, and thank you so much. And thank you again, everyone, for listening. And please join me again on the next episode. Bye.
Everyone.